Greetings everyone. Hope everybody is having a great, wonderful day. Today is the last part of the series Literary Devices, and we are going to discuss the remaining literary devices which William Blake has used in his poem A Poison Tree. We have already discussed rhyming scheme, alliteration, anaphora, and assonance in the first part of this series. We have discussed punctuation, allegory, and allusion in the second part of the same series, and link of the both has been given in the description. Today we will be discussing the remaining literary devices which William Blake has used in his poem A Poison Tree. So let's start with the imagery first. What is imagery? Imagery is kind of a description or vivid language which writer uses to enhance the understanding of reader. This vivid language appeals to the senses of the reader. It taps to the senses of reader. Imagery has been used throughout the poem A Poison Tree, such as the plant of hatred that the speaker has indicated is being watered in fears and being nourished night and morning with tears. Then, when that plant of hate has grown and bore an apple bright, the fruit of vengeance, speaker's enemy has come to steal it. And after eating that fruit of hate and revenge, the demise of foe has been described as my foe outstretched beneath the tree. So, the imagery has been used throughout the poem. So let's discuss symbolism, another literary device, and how Blake has used in his poem A Poison Tree. William Blake's A Poison Tree basically uses three symbols: the poison, the tree, the apple. The poison symbolizes the toxic and destructive nature of the anger. The tree represents the growing anger in the speaker's heart against his enemy, and the apple represents the fruit of that anger, an action in the poem, that is murder. So when anger is not allowed out into the open, but instead forced down into ourselves, as we try to hide it and pretend it isn't there, the outcome of such concealment isn't that the anger dissipates or disappears. Instead, it poisons us, so we become consumed by our own hatred. Like in the poem, when speaker was telling us about the nourishment of his hate towards his enemy, he was not only preparing the demise of his enemy, but he was poisoning himself in the process as well, as he implied murder in his final act when he told us that his enemy outstretched beneath the tree of his hate after consuming the fruit of his speaker's hate and vengeance. The title of the poem, that is the A Poison Tree, though these two symbols have collectively symbolizing the toxic nature of the anger and how when it grows, how it destroys the person who is angry. Actually, he is obviously going to show his anger towards his enemy, and he is also going to act towards that enemy because he has resentment against that enemy. But he is not only just going to destroy the enemy, he is also going to destroy himself in the process as well. Like poet has told us about the heinous act when he has killed his enemy in the end, when his enemy was just lying there under the tree after eating that apple. The apple which was shiny and bright, and it has attracted and tempted his enemy, and when the enemy has consumed that apple, he was killed. So the third symbol, that is the apple symbolizes the outcome of speaker's brooding resentment. Just as he encouraged his anger to grow by ignoring it and pretending it did not exist, so he eventually caused it to come out and show itself in the form of a bright apple. The apple is bright and shiny in order to attract his enemy to it. His enemy knows it belongs to speaker, but he sneaks into his garden to steal it for himself all the same. Apple have long been associated with temptations thanks to the story of Adam and Eve from the book of Genesis. According to the long tradition, the forbidden fruit which Eve was tempted to eat, despite God telling her to keep her hands off it, it was apple. In actual fact, the Bible does not specify what the forbidden fruit was, but John Milton's, whose work Blake knew well, made it an apple in his well-known epic poem Paradise Lost. So the apple in Blake's poem certainly glimmer with biblical association of temptation. After all, it tempts the speaker's enemy to his garden and corruption. The apple is the fruit of speaker's wrath in the poem. So another literary device which has been used in the poem A Poison Tree is antithesis. Antithesis is a literary device that positions opposite ideas parallel to each other. It is a type of figure of speech in the same category as the literary devices of contrast, such as oxymoron, juxtaposition, antiphrasis, and paradox. Antithesis has been used in stanza 2 and stanza 3 of the poem A Poison Tree. In stanza 2, poet has juxtaposed the act of nourishment of a plant with the nourishment of hatred and resentment. Like watering the plant and providing it nourishment through sunlight, these are the acts of love and care. But they are juxtaposing with the nourishment of hatred and resentment here in stanza 2, where speaker is telling us about his resentment towards his enemy and how he is growing that resentment by watering it with in fears and then taking care of that hatred with tears and then providing it sunlight with his smiles. So these are basically the act of love and care and nourishment, but they are juxtaposing with the nourishment of hatred and resentment. Then in stanza 3, that plant which he has been nourishing and taking care of here in stanza 2 has grown into a tree now, and it has borne a fruit, and that fruit is apple bright. These things like tree and garden and fruit, these are basically the symbols of good thing. These are the representation of something good, something refreshing, but they are juxtaposing with the nourishment of hatred and with the growth of hatred and resentment here as well. Another literary device which Blake has used in his poem A Poison Tree is metaphor. What is metaphor? Metaphor is the comparison of two things that are otherwise unrelated. For example, heart of gold, happy as a clam, or night owl, etc. So what metaphor has been used in his poem A Poison Tree? The most important metaphor in the poem is that of anger being similar to the tree. Then the process of cultivating one's emotion is compared to cultivating of a plant. It is another metaphor which has been used here. Third metaphor which Blake has used here is that emotion has followed through an entire growth cycle until it blossoms into death. So growth process of emotions has been compared with the growth process of a plant. Then apple bright has been metaphored for the fruit of speaker's grudge. So these are some of the metaphors which the writer has used in his poem, or Mr. Blake has used in his poem A Poison Tree. I hope that you have understood that poem, and as well as the literary devices which we have discussed by going through the poem A Poison Tree. That is a very straightforward and simple poem. It has been written in very simple words, but it has very deep meanings, as we have gone through the whole process of the literary devices, how poet has used those devices in his poem, in that poem, and how the use of those literary devices has made that poem very meaningful and very deep for the reader, even though it is written in very simple words and in a very straightforward way. I hope that you have understood it. If you have any query or any question, or if you want to suggest something, you can comment me in the comment section. Stay tuned, like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon as well. Thank you for watching. Bye.